Omphalos is a Greek word for navel. But that word navel is kind of tricky. It actually means a lot more than just navel. Let me make sure we got all this going on here. Wait, there we go. It actually means more than just navel, though. But that's sort of like the oldest thing that we're going to start with today. But before we get there, kind of like I had to do with Noah's Ark, I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that all of us were thinking consciously in the way we think now back then. And I think that you really lose a lot of understanding until you start to understand the psyche that you're dealing with. Public punishment was important in Rome. In the same tradition as seen in the crucifixion, was brought to the pillory. What I mean is that people were not crucified in private. The whole purpose of crucifixion in Rome was to send a message to people that did not have a frontal lobe. It takes a long time for consciousness to develop the ability to have things like dread. In other words, the amount of calories it takes for you to fantasize about an injury that could happen to you in the future is, quite frankly, one of the most advanced transmissions that's ever been created. This is your Promethean mind, your frontal lobe. And I think a lot of people that are interpreting ancient history are missing so much by assuming that we logically thought the same way as we did back then. And so in order for me to prime you for where we're going, I need to just briefly go over this. So keep in mind that the pillory was basically the stockade. You had different versions. Some you sat in, some you stood in. But it's the same as crucifixion in the sense that it's publicly displayed, that people are watching the public display happen. And because of that public display, it's able to invigorate an education about what will happen if you screw us. It's a form of threat that is not necessarily cruel as much as it's effective. People back then did not have the ability, as I said before, to really think about what happens to me if I do so and so. In fact, most of your witch burnings, most of your cleansing of paupers was the king trying to figure out which ones had a frontal lobe and which ones did not. In fact, the word for that is cunning person. And we ended up even having to make sure they didn't have too much of a frontal lobe. So keep in mind that all of these things it's naive if we do not fully understand what that means. And in order to do that, I would like to read the examination. Let's see here. This is out of the book Demonology from King James. The examination of Margaret Flower. She confesses that she has two familiar spirits sucking on her, the one white, the other black and spotted. The white sucked under her left breast, and the black spotted within the inward parts of her secrets. When she first entertained them, she promised them her soul, and they covenanted to do all things which she commanded of them. That's Margaret Flower. That was in 1618. Joane Willimott, same book. She hath a spirit which she calls pretty. She was given this spirit by William Barry of Langholm in Rutlandshire, whom she served 3 years in his house. He willed her to open her mouth, and he blew into her a fairy which should do her good, and that when she opened her mouth, he did blow into it, and presently after his blowing there came out of her mouth a spirit which stood upon the ground in the shape and form of a woman, which spirit did ask for her soul, which she then promised unto it, being willed thereunto by her master. She further confesses that she never hurt anybody, but she did help many that came to her for help, which were stricken or forspoken, and that her spirit came weakly to her, and would tell her of many persons that were stricken and forspoken as well. And she says that the use of which she had of the spirit was to know how these did which she had undertaken to amend, and that she did help them by certain prayers which she used, and not by her own spirit, neither did she employ her spirit in anything, but only to bring word to those who did which undertaken to be cured. It's awful comprehension, I know. This is like a sort of the literal translation of that book. King James, before he edited the Bible, he wrote this book, Demonology, and basically declared a war on all forms of cunnery, with the exception of pharmacopoeia and prayer. And I'm telling you, those two psyches, those two girls, were pretty standard. That you would watch people that were living in an animistic kind of a consciousness, where they would move from imagination to imagination. You and I used to do this as children. We call ourselves advanced, even though really what happened is that we lost the ability to imaginate anything else without everyone else's approval. And we call that puberty, and then we call that society. So all of us have been standardized into the idea that we have to imaginate a certain gender, a certain role, a certain framework. This is how we got last names: Miller, Smith, all the other jobs, Baker, all the other jobs were simply us associating into a mode that was publicly acceptable, and therefore our identity built like a shell around that. So early consciousness didn't necessarily even have a name. One of the issues that I take with the idea of saying that Jesus was a child trafficker is that people in Rome didn't actually have a name until they were about 5 years old. It sounds kind of weird, but you have to. This is why I'm doing this first. I can't wait to jump into this Delphi stuff, but I need you to know that being 5 years old does not give you a name. The identity is a very advanced form of neurology. And that before the identity comes up, you have a very animistic kind of a state. This is why half of Rome was built on slavery. It was an upwardly mobile society. Did human trafficking exist? Absolutely. Of course it did. But the humans itself were not the same as what we think of them today. Most of humanity during that time, I'll just say it, was more of a beast of burden kind of consciousness. It wasn't actually a crime. You would not actually be crucified for human trafficking, which is why I'm sort of like, yeah, I don't know if that's the right word. That word is predator, by the way. And predators took Caesar, and predators hung Jesus on the cross. If Jesus would have done something seditious, like if he was trying to revolt against the local village, that would get him crucified. If he was to steal someone that didn't have a name yet, even if someone had a name yet, that crime actually is not worthy of crucifixion. It's just, it's important to understand what Psyche was. It was so much more in serfdom. I've told you a little bit about this before, but that even now we have the remnants of serfs in like trailer parks where people are attached to the land. And if you're going to buy or sell the land, at least back then, it was much more understood that sometimes that land came with people and that they were planted like potatoes in that land. And basically there's no getting rid of them. In fact, you would have to actually guarantee the sanctuary for them. To not do so, you would be considered a poor patriarch. We have a very shitty definition of the word patriarch right now, but back then patriarch was I still think it is now. We're just shitting on it because we're getting better. Honestly, we're getting taller. But back then we didn't. We needed patriarch because that was what it required for you to hold enough memory. The slave themselves, being inside of a patriarch's house, would actually be given an identity, and he could come home and lose that identity and gain it again, and lose that identity and gain it again. It's a way of creating training wheels for a budding consciousness. This is why half of Rome was in slavery. It wasn't because they were forced. A lot of us like to picture slavery as if there's an oppressor and there's someone that's been placed in a bondage. Certainly a lot of things like that happen, but most of Rome was not. If you have trouble understanding this, I want you to try and imagine how Caesar convinced 1 million forest berserkers, half of them fucking naked, that they were now his slaves. That the only way you could really convince that is if someone was already a beast of burden. And this is the kind of consciousness that I want you to understand. You're probably looking at maybe 4 colors. People weren't even talking in colors back then. That kind of discernment was simply above our ability to understand. And this, I think, is almost impossible for a new person, including myself, to really fathom what this was like. But it's just a simple truth. And so thinking about things like the pillory or the stockade or the crucifixion, like now in today's time, we can't even imagine something like that. But back then it was necessary to set the tone in the village about what was going to be allowed or not. Just to kind of really bring this term home, there's sort of a difference between normies and cunning folk back then. Normies were more the red team. If you've been following my slide about the red team versus the blue team, basically the giants versus now, they didn't have the ability to discern lies, but additionally, they didn't really have the ability to utilize logic. There's a term in the dictionary called horse crook. And a horse crook is right now, we just think of it as, oh, well, it's when you have a cane that has a horse's head. But a horse crook was actually proof of what I'm trying to tell you about. That one of the things that King James declared war on was that he didn't like witches, he didn't like cunning women, utilizing magic like horse crooks to heal people. So how would this work? The witch would tell the person, this is the beast of burden, the witch would tell the beast of burden, hey man, you've got some back problems. And he's like, what back? Me not know back. Me no understand concept of back. And she would reach him as a cunning woman. She would say, what you need is the energy and magic of hippo camp of hip. I'm just saying hippo because hip's like horse, but like of horse. So whatever the word is for horse back then, and that if you were to stroke this horse when you walk, and she would give him a stick that had a handle that sort of looked like a horse's head, that she would convey to him that it's important that you massage the horse. And by massaging the horse, you are invoking the magic of not having a sore back. And the man that's what he would understand. He wouldn't understand, hi, you have a back, you have a spine, what you have are tendons, what you have are muscles. It wasn't the kind of thinking is what I mean. Certainly there was anatomy back then. There was all kinds of things. But most of the people that you're dealing with weren't really functioning on a logical level that you and I would think about right now. Another example of this, which is still carried on today, believe it or not, is something called witch prickers, which is pictured here on the right. These are the first early forms of needles, of inoculation needles, where we would inoculate you from Baal. Think about it. Baal is bull. We would inoculate you from the magic of Baal, the devil, by taking the pus of a cow, Baal, and putting it inside of you. This is the birth of homeopathy, attacking like, or probably not attacking, but matching like with like. And the ability is that we will grow a pus farm we would grow a pus farm on the side of this cow because you are possessed by a bull. And so this is the kind of psyche it's still here. We still have that same psyche. And quite frankly, this is why I think we inoculate. We inoculate because we felt that it was doing something positive in regard to witchcraft, right? So okay, that's all for that one. Another important part of understanding this is processing early emotions and shame. Quite frankly, when our emotional mind came online, meaning that we started to have empathy and sympathy come online, it was terrifying. It drove us nuts. And we started to look for ways to extricate or exercise or baptize or cleanse ourselves from these feelings. And we're still doing that now, which is why we ended up venerating the very people who were processing their feelings the most. So all of the saints that you see listed here are saints who've accomplished one goal and one goal alone, and that is surviving self-torture. That they either tortured themselves or they purposely chose something that would cause them a lot of torture, and that torture, the ability to hold and feel pain, we considered to be saintly. And I think the reason why is because anyone who had a wider diaphragm, I'm talking about your aperture of consciousness, anyone who had a wider drum, who could perceive a wider wavelength, was considered a cunning person, because they quite frankly just knew the environment better. They were aware of predator easier, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to read all these because we have a lot to cover, but I'll just say that Hippolytus was torn apart by wild horses, which shows you that he was given that name because the word hippo actually means horse. But all these, whether you be beheaded, crucified, thrown into a kiln, boiled alive, pulled out, then raped, then put back into the kiln, all these horrible things are simply our veneration of pain, of emotional strife, you could say, is probably a better word for that. Last point, then we'll get to the good stuff. Back then, there was a ritual, not back then, and not in the long ago, but just in the long ago, there was a ritual called Sundance. And we've talked about it many times on the channel, but that local indigenous worshipers would hang themselves from trees that were suspended to twine or leather, typically the skin of deer stretched as cord, and that cord was attached to eagle talons, and those eagle talons were pierced through your fucking nipples, and you hung all day during the sun. This was called the sun dance, and the illusions, or the hallucinations that would come up as a part of this journey were, quite frankly, your movement into manhood, because you were ready to master your emotions. That's not exactly the word, but if you follow what I'm saying about Psyche, it kind of makes sense that we would develop this into a ritual. The reason why I'm bringing this up now is because I want you to be aware that all of our rituals have been softened over time, that we've taken rituals that used to have a lot of strife in them, and that we've simplified and softened them and created them into these candy-coated versions today. And so this Sundance ritual does exist today, and to be fair, the government did declare this illegal, but we don't have time to dwell on this point, but that what we see is a ritual that's been cleansed, and that cleansing has made it soft, and we've lost the entire meaning behind it. And that's what's happening here. This man is stroking the end of a penis. It's a stone penis. But the word is Omphalos, and Omphalos means navel, and it means navel because navel sounds a lot better. And navel is the center of the world, so it even fits too. And in fact, in Egypt, when we start to realize that a lot of times when we think Horus is actually standing over the penis, he's actually standing over the navel itself, the umbilical cord. So I'm going to allow it this time, but I want you to see very soon that you're about to find out what anointed really means. And some of you guys are going to need a towel. Omphalos does not mean navel, but it's been translated into navel because this would be the only PG-13 way that we could actually describe what we're talking about. The oldest story that I've ever found when it deals to Greece or Delphi itself is this. It is the story of two eagles who were dispatched to find the center of the world. One flew to the west, another flew to the east. When these eagles returned, they both dropped a stone, and that the stone that they dropped was the marking of the Omphalos. This was considered the center of the world. The center of the world is more important than you might think. When I first heard this story, I thought, why is the center of the world so important? But when you don't have a patriarch, when you do not have a clock or a calendar or a Julian or a Polaris or some kind of universal thing, we lack the ability to hold collective consciousness, and so our calendar is diminished. We end up with a pagan-esque type thinking where we think in 7-day intervals, and that you as a slave would think of yourself in a 7-day creation. On Sunday I wash this, on Monday I do this, on Tuesday I scrub this, on Wednesday I am beaten for this, right? That your life as a slave is basically a beast of burden that just exists in a cycle. You, the slave, is not preparing for a winter, for example. You're simply preparing for what do I have to do today in order to sleep, eat, or not get beaten. The center is the center of Psyche, too. It's so crucial. And the Omphalos, set by these two eagles, is something that's seen all over the world. Many of us will call it Tartaria. And I think we dismiss that because we don't feel like reading. We'd rather watch videos, which is fine. Videos are great. You're watching one right now. Thank you for watching James True Live. But that even in the deepest clutches of India, there are these two eagles. And these two eagles have brought something back. And what they brought back is the Omphalos. You're looking at two elephants that are reaching up for the Omphalos right now. However, it's not called Omphalos in India. It's called the Lingam. The Lingam. Hello, everyone. Hope I'm not going too fast. I just really want you guys to get this. It's so cool. Omphalos beget Petra. On the left is what people at the Delphi Museum would want you to believe is the original Omphalos stone. I'm not saying they're wrong, but this is just what museums do. And that this Omphalos is decorated with different cords and different ribbons. But ultimately what this is that upon this lingam, upon this Omphalos, upon this navel, upon this penis, this PeePee, I just said penis for the first time, that upon this PeePee, I will build my church. And some of you have heard that from Matthew 16, upon this rock, I will build my church. So the navel of the world is actually the center of the church as well. In fact, when you look at the Kaaba, what do you have? You have a Petra, you have a rock, you have a stone. And the center of that stone has been declared as the center of the world. Some of you guys may not be aware of this. I just learned this. I find it fascinating. But that early Jewish, back before they were early Hebrew clergy, were offered allegiance inside of Islam, and that all they had to do was accept Muhammad. And that the very heart of where the Kaaba was up for grabs. And that one of the reasons why it was up for grabs is because a lot of the factions of Islam that was trying to spread their religion to the world thought that they could incorporate Judaism, and that they knew that by offering a central rock, that was going to be a problem. And they waited until Judaism was completely out before they said, all right, we're going to fucking have our Kaaba now. And you'll notice that the Kaaba moved a couple times because the navel of the world is crucial to hold the consciousness together. And what ends up happening out of that, you end up with an Islamic world of thought and a Protestant world of thought. But all these are still theism. It's still the three of theism, but that's another topic. But I want you to just see the similarities upon there. That Petra, that word means rock. And even though it says, upon this rock, your name is Peter. Upon this rock I will build your church. That really it says, your name is Petra. Upon this rock I will build my church. And that really does come back to this ancient idea of the navel, the Omphalos, and the center of the world itself, because that was what Delphi was. It was the center of the world. And you would go to Delphi and anoint the PeePee, the navel, the Omphalos, to prove your devotion. This was the first pilgrimage that we have listed down in our records, you could say. The Lingam and the Yoni, there's Indian terms, Hindu terms, not just Hindu. I'm sorry, just trying to go quick here. And that the anointed one comes to some of the earliest rituals dating 5,000 years back, where you're coming up to a stone, Omphalos, PeePee, Lingam. And you guys like it when I say PeePee? Let me know if you do. And that you're pouring milk on top of it. You're pouring a white liquid. Is anyone catching on to this yet? And that virgins are stroking I'm going to just say it. Virgins are stroking a lingam and anointing it with white PeePee juice, ladies and gentlemen. With white PeePee juice. In the bottom right corner on this slide, you actually see Mithras himself standing above the Omphalos as another clergy is pointing his mercury stick directly at the Omphalos, as if to charge it. Who knows, right? The clearest proof that the first Christ comes from this place is going to be what I'm about to show you. It's the ritual of the oil dance. I can't believe I found this. Ladies and gentlemen, I still don't have my budget yet for Patreon. I spent all day Sunday finding this clip. I finally found it. I love what I do. If you appreciate this show, please join Patreon. It makes no sense why I can't just have this like basic little amount. I'm just a few $100s away. If you could consider joining Patreon right now, it would really help. If you find this information enticing, if you appreciate the amount of work that goes into it, it'd be a great time to join, especially before the end of the month. Come on. I'll try and break this up if I need to and like separate things into private. But if you could just join Patreon, I could just keep all my shows public, right? And we could just do that. And I would only have to interrupt, the shows a few times right now. So man, can you guys just join Patreon? Just join. Thanks for being here. Really. Does that sound too whiny? Let me know in the comments. Let me know on Patreon. There you go. By the way, you can join Patreon for free. It doesn't really help me with the budget, but you can still join for free. Stay in touch. Hope you're doing well. All right. So the ritual of oral dance occurred at Delphi. It occurred in Athens. It occurred in a lot of temples. One of the rites that kicked this off was typically funerary, that when you would come into a town in ancient Greece, you would, a lot of times the religious ceremonies would be wrapped into the funeral ceremonies too, but you're about to find out what the religious ceremonies really were. Remember what I told you about Sundance, about how we've softened all of our rituals, like really, really softened them? Okay. I need you to really, really keep that in mind right now. What you're about to see is a reenactment of an ancient Greek ceremony, and I need you to picture that you have eagle talons in your nipples, because you're about to see some of the most erotic, funkadelic thing you could ever see, but only if you put on the eyes of what it was probably like. The ritual you're about to see, people would travel for hundreds of miles. They would travel for weeks at a time to either bury someone that was very important to them, or more importantly, bury someone but then participate in this ritual. The finest virgins you could ever find were from Pythia. The most famous virgins you could ever find were in the Parthenia. Guys, what do you think made them famous? Why do you think they're called virgins? All right. Before I play this, let me just read you this. This is from Homer's Iliad. It's a death poem. But when his soul and life abandoned him, send death and sweet sleep to carry him away. And there shall his brothers and his kinfolk give him burial with mound and pillar. Did you hear that? For this is the due of the dead. For mound and pillar. Mound and pillar is Yoni and Lingam. It is the Omphalos. And I want you to put on your X-ray glasses and make sure I got it queued up. And watch this as if you were in ancient Greece. This is as close as you're ever going to find. I'm not muted. Look at that. I'm not muted. So, you just, podcast listeners, you just watched a reenactment from the ancient museum at Athens, I think, that they had produced. In fact, I'll probably get copyright stroke here, which is why I want you to join Patreon, by the way, because it's like, that's fine. Let them have that. But let's keep teaching, right? So consider joining Patreon. But because I really wanted you to see that anyway. But that's a reenactment from there, and but it's very tame. Obviously, there's a giant phallus in the middle. What you may not have noticed is that they were stroking the phallus with olive oil. And something else I want to add to you is that the olive oil was actually handpicked by the virgins themselves, and that they would come to the temple and not partake in sex during their stay at the temple, and that during their stay, because they had not partaken in sex, they were considered clean enough to pluck the olives. And by plucking the olives, this was a very intensive work, because after they plucked them, they pressed them. They pressed them to release the milk from the olives themselves, or the oil, I should say. And then that oil was processed, and then it was spilt, it was sacrificed during this ceremony. I'm calling it the full moon. I actually don't know which time, during the cycle, but it was definitely a lunar kind of thing. Yes, this is Pornhub, Ajax. Welcome. You need to click that you're an adult, because this was very erotic stuff then. These parties were a lot of drugs certainly was a part of it, but I see, I'm apprehensive to tell you guys a lot about early drug use only because I don't think that we understand consciousness effectively to know which things that they were doing back then were for psychotropic purposes and which weren't. I have a strong reason to think this, and the closest I can say is that if you've ever tasted traditional Roman food, traditional colonial food, traditional British food, anything that they've found a recipe from like hundreds of years ago, and you taste it, it is some of the most awful stuff you've ever had. Most of it's impossible. In fact, if you watch those shows where they're reenacting the cooking, you'll always see a segment where they're like, yeah, we tried to make it this way. That shit wasn't going to work. Then we made it this way instead. And that's not just the substitution of ingredients. You're looking at a different taste palette. We discussed this briefly when I told you that the red team, the giants, were called acorn eaters. Why? Right? Because the amount of acid that was in that food was palatable to them versus the blue team, which couldn't eat it. So all that to wrap up here to say, this is a highly sexualized ceremony. The olive oil was anointing the phallus. The phallici was anointed by the olive oil. This was the sacrifice. The virgin idea, I think Mel Gibson installed this in people. The idea that you would be a virgin and then you would lose your virginity and then you would not be a virgin again. This is not an idea that has any historical proof at all. Like none. It literally was quite the opposite. Parthenia was the essence of your sanctity. And that the essence of this sanctity came and went as time went on. We'll get to this in a second. It came and went as time went on. The name of Parthenon is based on the word Parthenia. The temple priestess, the virgins, would come to the temple to be chaste. After their era of being chaste, they would not be chaste anymore. Do you want to know how they would stop being chaste? Because the answer is right after that pole ceremony, there was a giant orgy. And those virgins were parthenized, we'll say. That they expunged their virginity to the highest, to the people that came the farthest, who paid the most, and that upon this rock, ready, rock upon Peter. Peter, he's risen again. Upon this rock I will build my church is the earliest church. The earliest church is the brothel. This is not disrespectful in any way. I am a Christian. Some people don't like it when I say that, but I love Christ. I love this religion because of the things I'm telling you now, not in spite of it. It is because of the history that we've been able to trace these things that I feel so invigorated about studying my religion in this way. But this is a very shameful thing to do and is often pushed aside. The Ankh itself, a very famous symbol from Egypt, is the rod and the almond, something you're about to learn about, but it is the Lingam and the Yoni combined. And that's why in Egypt you know the Ankh as the symbol of life. This exact same symbol, by the way, this cross with the loop at the top, is actually used in Greek writing to specify the anointing. The anointing of something, first used in Greek writing about 300 AD, something like that. And this symbol is found there. So the anointing itself is so standardized that we start to use it as just a regular verb, which basically it used to mean getting laid. It used to mean going to a ritual party like a Burning Man every month. And Burning Man is like you're about to find a whole other thing that happens down there because you've been worshiping too much. That if you keep worshiping this much, you're going to have a Burning Man down there. So Apollo Delphia is on the right here on a coin. This is Apollo Delphios. And that on this coin, you'll see that Apollo is actually sitting on top of the Omphalos, the center of the world. Now, Apollo, you might notice, looks kind of sort of like half a chick. And that's because it was. Apollo was a hermaphrodite. This is something we're going to have to save for another episode, but that the early Christ itself started to be humanized in the union of male and female. And this could not be clearer, I think, than when you consider that the Yoni itself, one of the big symbols that is in this Hindu traditions, is the idea of a rising snake. And that rising snake is quite literally your PeePee. And your PeePee goes, and when it raises itself up at the Lingam and the Yoni, you have reached immortality. Why have you reached immortality? Because you are going to put your milk in the Yoni. Put your milk in the Yoni. I think one of the things that's so hard for us to understand is that we cannot fathom the idea that we would need to be taught about fertility. I know this is just so difficult to accept, but it's just true. We had to be taught fertility. This is a very big part of our history, and it's something we'll be covering, although I've already covered an Ark of Noah stuff, so maybe I won't actually cover it. You should check out my other videos for that. So, the virgins of Phthia were waiting in the temple for the giant snake sent by men who came for thousands of miles. What does Phthia mean? Pithos. What is Pithos? Python. What is Python? The giant snake. Apollo cleanses the Pithos. He separates and cuts the Pithos into tiny pieces. And all the memory of wanting to be forgiven, of wanting to find the temple, to expunge to blow your load, is now cast aside. It's done by the sea. This is an Aphrodite reference. We're getting way off track here. But that all of this came from our basic animistic moving from sexual reproduction into fertility into religion. That all of these came from the same place. The Migdal is a word that means almond or tower or preserver. And that Magdalene is a transliteration of the word Migdal. Simon was a fisherman who immediately left his nets to follow Jesus. And what did Jesus say? Jesus said, I'm going to call you Peter. I'm going to call you Priapus. I'm going to call you Priapus because you left your fishing. What does this mean? As plain as I can put it. When you were thriving in Rome in a massive sex cult, you are going to have a lot of gonorrhea, a lot of syphilis, especially when you're packed like sardines. And the more that you're secreting your juices in the sacred temple, the more STDs are prone. And that early ideas of being possessed by the devil, of being tempted by the snake, were in fact gonorrhea, syphilis, crabs, whatever it was back then, that was slowly learning to invigorate or educate us about what it means to have sanctity. Do you understand? What it means to be clean. And this truly is at the base root of all religion, which is why it's so important. It is so ironic, my friends, that the person that Jesus Christ that we most think about, that's been painted in so many images, it's been historically said that it is Cesare Borgia, the son of the Pope IV's son. And that what is so ironic about that is that Peter Bourgeois, who has this beautiful image of Christ, I'm sorry it's not a better picture in the top right corner here, but you can look him up. But he's considered the face of Christ and he's considered beautiful. But if you look up the history of him, he suffered from syphilis so bad that he had to wear a leather mask over half of his face. And that even that, I think, is like this oracle mythology pointing back to the Christ, the anointed one, the one that would have sex with oil on their penis. The one who would have sex with oil on their penis. One of many things that I will give Dr. Hillman credit for is that the idea of anointing someone would protect the snake itself. And that I think that maybe he might be missing those two, but not even say missing. He's just got a totally different view on the same thing, and both of us are looking at some cool stuff. I hope you will look at this too. I think that you'll find that Christianity goes even deeper, because in my mind, Christ came from the Lingam. It came from Delphi herself. Apollo himself was invigorated in this, and that's why I find it so fascinating. Let's continue. As I've said before, the Ark of the Covenant is literally just this box. This would be the Migdal. This would be the woman's almond. And that the Ark itself is invaded by the rod of Aaron. Guess what? The rod of Aaron is the almond tree. And that the two stone tablets, the two commandments, are placed into the Ark with the rod of Aaron. And that this is just fertility. That if you want to have a union, you were going to put your PeePee inside the hoo-hoo, and that you will see God. Guys, PeePee inside hoo-hoo, you will see God. Even in your most lowest animistic state, you and I are worshiping the same thing, because we're looking at each other going, we will row faster. We will get to the Temple of Delphi faster because the moon is coming and we do not want to miss, because upon this fucking rock I will build my church. And the psyche of someone that is turned on and the psyche of someone that has just spent their load are two completely different creatures, two completely different psyches. And I think this is really at the heart of understanding. This is why I started this off by reading you the consciousness, how this was seen in demonology, because you as a man was a completely different personality when you had a heart on versus when you didn't. And the visiting of these brothels was the separation between angel and demon, between these, not necessarily that specifically, but I'm just saying two completely different personalities, that when you go into the monastery, one personality comes in, and when you leave, another comes in. This is the exact same principle of any Hodge that you've ever heard about. Thank you, Mo. Appreciate it. Thank you, Portafinder. Appreciate it. That's why most churches were just full of vaginas. Just, oh my God, I wish I parked next to vagina K. Where'd you park? I parked next to vagina M. Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that vagina. And it's like, well, hey, you want to sit together? Sure, I'll meet you under the big vagina. Okay, wait, which big vagina? The one where the face is going, ah. It's like, well, which one? The one that's like, she's looking to the left going, ah. Oh, okay, that one. Yeah. And that all these were decorated with churches because that's where you come in offering. What do you think the first offering was, guys? I'm not kidding. The first offering was, where would a guy go to masturbate into a rock? And that the moment he did that, that rock was anointed with his milk. And that the fertility, the preservation of that was the understanding of where does this go? Do you realize how long that would have taken to even realize that when I put this inside of her, think about the math involved. When early man's like, oh, you there, because they probably don't have names, right? And female cave chicks like, what you there? He's like, me have urge. She like, me not understand her. She's like, it okay. You not remember what I do anyway. Probably forgive me in 3 minutes. She goes, what forgive? He goes, aha, exactly. And then he's like, I have this strong desire to intuitively follow my snake. What does that mean? My snake is invigorating and telling me that I need to place it inside of here. But when I say in here, there are 2 different holes. I'm sorry to be vulgar, but this is just how it is. There are 2 different holes down here. There are 2 different holes. Somehow my snake knows which hole to go to. Somehow I have this different kind of consciousness that loads on, takes over. The transposons are genetic virus. Remember I told you 20% of you is roughly made up of this archaic ancient virus, and that virus starts to take over your young animistic mind, and you feel like you are possessed by Petra. You are possessed by the anointed fucking Christ. I mean fucking in that way. The fucking Christ. This is not sacrilegious. If you feel that way, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's no reason to feel that way. This is the true church. Thank you, Stretch. You are too. This is the true church. And this is how it works, because this is the only way you're going to bring people from thousands of miles. I did a whole episode of this. The worship of Priapus, cache of 4,000 buried phalluses found in Rome. I'm not making this up. One of the artifacts from this is the story of Jack and Jill. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 11. And as they went up the hill to the city, they found young maidens going out to draw water, and said unto them, Is the seer here? Is the seer here? And I want you to notice something, that they went up the hill. They went up the hill, and they found young maidens, and that the maidens were drawing water. How does the maiden draw water at the top of a hill? The top of a hill would be a tower. It would be a Migdal. It would be something that's away from water. Yet we have in the Bible this story where we go up and we find young maidens at the top of the hill, and that the maidens are drawing water. And the same story is inside of Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Ladies and gentlemen, the crown is Malamu. It is the charged aura of a man who is turned on. And when you do not see colors the way we do, you see shimmering. You see what's called terrifying charisma. And we've been talking about this for weeks. I can't go into it now. Oh my God, we're almost out of time. But we've been talking about this for a long time, and that this is anointed aura is expunged when the man comes. When he comes, he will come again. He is risen again. Mary Magdalene was the only person who saw that Christ rose again. Why? Because she stroked him with her pail, her Yoni, when he came to church. Cloistered nuns have less syphilis. Cloistered nuns have less syphilis. If you will put your whores into a cloistered tower for 1 month out of every year, their hoo-hoos will be clean. They will become virgin again. And cloistered nuns became a symbol for the early anointed, people who worshipped their Priapus getting off inside of a holy nunnery called a church. And they started to worship the church that would cloister their nuns once a month. We're getting to there. First, I need to say Kaku, Phallus, son of the Phallus. All of these names are pharaohs, but pharaoh means son of Phallus. Pharaoh means Falao, Falao. Falao, she says. Falao. The onus of how large his phala is Phallos, and the true meaning of every pharaoh that's ever ruled. Keep in mind, we had these anti-modesty festivities all through Rome, and this is really the heart of the syphilis and all the gonorrhea, and that this is at the very heart of what caused Christianity to be born. I'm going to read this. At the celebration of Floralia, Cato, who some of you know, not at all disapproving of the licentious exhibitions, retired so that his well-known gravity or modesty might in no wise restrain the celebrants, because the multitude shows hesitation in stripping the nuns. This is actual word for word translation from the from not, it wasn't Cato's writing, but someone writing about Cato. Stripping of the nuns or sacred prostitutes stark naked in the presence of a man so celebrated for his modesty, meaning Cato is celebrated for his modesty. Out of all these sex cults, you most of the concept of phi, of iho, of even the fleur-de-lis of France come from this union, even marriage itself, of the Lingam and the Yoni, the PeePee and the hoo-hoo. We just did this last week, but swearing on the phallus, it's all over the Bible. Genesis 47:29, Genesis 2:4-9. Mary is a sacred virgin, holds an egg. An egg is a word that means sarcophagus or egg preserver. Sarcophagus means egg. It's not actually means coffin, it means egg. That you would place the pharaoh, the phalaho, inside the egg to preserve it. And Mary's holding the egg because if you stick your phalaho inside the Mary ho-ho and she anoints you with oil, as you see here, then you end up with everlasting life. You end up with everlasting life. Man, I wish we could keep going. It's time to go. We will catch more of this next time. Please let me know what you think. Appreciate you so much for being here. Have a great day. And please consider joining Patreon. You know, if we had the full patron thing, I could just keep going. I could. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching James True Live.